Good morning, everyone. I am Jim Pfeiffer. I am the Executive Director of the Regional Water Authority, and I welcome you to RWA Coffee and Conversation with Jen Quan this morning. A few housekeeping notes, but before I even get to that, I'd like to introduce you to the Regional Water Authority. The Regional Water Authority mission is to serve and represent the interest of regional water providers and stakeholders for the purpose of improving water supply reliability, availability, quality, and affordability. This organization represents the interest of 22 water agencies in the greater Sacramento region, which collectively serve water to over 2.2 million people. This is our 23rd year. I'm going to go over a few housekeeping announcements before we get the show going. This webinar is being recorded. Please feel free to submit questions as we go through the program using the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. We will answer questions during the session as time allows. And there's a live transcript available by clicking the live transcript button at the bottom of the screen. Today, it's my pleasure to introduce Michelle Banonis of the Regional Water Authority, the Regional Water Authority's Manager of Strategic Affairs. She has nearly 2.5 decades of experience in California water. Before coming here, she was the Assistant Chief Deputy Director for the California Department of Water Resources, where she worked on water issues of statewide significance. And prior to that, she was with the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation, where she served as the Bay Delta Area Manager, Special Assistant to the Regional Director, Water Fix Program Manager, and various other roles, including working on the San Joaquin Restoration Program. Michelle holds a bachelor's degree in environmental engineering from the Michigan Technological University, and then she later earned a Juris Doctor degree from Humphreys College. She's an attorney. And with that, thank you, Michelle, and I'm going to hand the baton to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jim. And I'd just like to reiterate and thank everybody today for attending. It's my great pleasure to introduce Jennifer Quan. Jen Quan has been the Regional Administrator for the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration's Fisheries West Coast region since April 2023. With over 27 years in natural resources, Jen's career spans state and federal government, the U.S. Senate, and collaborations with Pacific Northwest tribes. Her expertise covers dolphin conservation, whale research, fisheries management, and ESA regulations. Jen holds a master's in marine affairs from the University of Washington, go Huskies, and a Bachelor of Science from the Evergreen State College. Jen, I want to thank you so much for attending today. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to you for some opening remarks and any thoughts you'd like to share before we jump into the difficult questions.
Sure. Well, thank you. Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Jim and Michelle, for the invite. And I really want to say that I appreciate RWA's effort to facilitate connections like this. So excited to be here. Just a couple more things about me that I would share. I'm a parent. I've got 3 almost mostly grown kids. My last one just graduated from high school this June. I'm a dog owner. It's a golden doodle, so please do not judge. They're really good dogs. And in my spare time, I play as much golf as I can fit in. Please don't judge there either. And there will be no sharing of handicaps or comparison of handicaps today either, just FYI. And something else I would say, for breakfast, I often drink a smoothie with almond milk. And one of my favorite dinner pairings is rice with salmon. And I say that just to highlight that, when I come to the table, I realize that I benefit from all the work you all do, because I need to access the water that you all provide, because I drink and use it, and I benefit from it every day. And I say that not only for me, but I think for my staff. And when we come to the table to work with you all, we are all working together. So I just started over a year ago, and while I'm still relatively new to California issues, I'm not new to the types of issues we're facing as it comes to natural resources. And as I've been getting to know California, the things I am fascinated by are the complexity of the state government, the dynamics of water management and operations with the state and local governments. And I'm also pleasantly surprised at what I'm finding as I engage groups like RWA and others about the acknowledgement and needs of fish and natural resources, the commitments that are being made by almost all the parties, and what I see as a shared interest in recovering salmon. So that is really a pleasant surprise, because that has been one of the biggest hurdles I've had to face in my career. I like to start off some of my engagements like this connecting in areas where we have commonality. And this is fairly big picture, but I think it sets the stage for a lot of the work that we're going to have to do in the future, as well as what we're doing right now. So some of the areas of commonality I see in our work together are things like new technologies. So I think we are all grappling with things like AI, with forecast improved reservoir operations, and for us, even new technologies and ways of passing fish to areas where we haven't seen them before. We all have probably are starting to experience something that feels like evolving mission requirements. You know, for us at NOAA Fisheries, it's things like offshore wind coming online, where we're having to learn and engage with a brand new industry. We're having to learn from our lessons in engagements with the hydro industries. And for you all, you may be seeing shifts in how water is being used and allocated, and hydro being one of those. In some cases, we're starting to see where hydro is no longer a good business for people. Warming climates, I don't need to say much about that. We have been all experiencing that very acutely. Fiscal constraints in government especially. I am actively planning and preparing for a workforce that will not grow, but thinking about how I service a population that will. Our changing workforce, the skills that our new future workforce will need, is something that I personally can only begin to imagine. And I do think that it means we're going to have to balance what we've learned from the past. So we have a lot that we can learn from the past, but letting go to make room for new ideas. And I think we're going to have to, because some of these things we're experiencing with climate change are not things that we've experienced in the past. So we are going to have to make room for those new ideas. Equity and environmental justice. There's been such a massive growth and understanding of how historically our practices, and even presently how our practices are impacting some of the underserved and under-resourced communities. And I think we're rapidly all trying to figure out how we implement changes as fast as we can to make up for some of those past mistakes. But for me, all this means that I'm going to have to lead and instill a workplace culture that is probably more innovative and has a higher risk tolerance. And I'm starting to see these trends pop up not only in our needs as we're planning our future workforce, but also at state and local scales. And it's the willingness to talk about innovation, not to get stuck in our ways and our authorities and our missions, but to be more innovative and take some higher risks together. And, for me, what this means is that NIMS is going to meet its policy goals and missions going forward. We're going to have an increased reliance on non-federal partners. So it's really my long-term vision, and part of my excitement of why I'm here today is to hope that you'll be able to see NIMS, see past NIMS as a regulator and really as a valuable partner where we can achieve some of these things together. And that hopefully you'll see that we're not really scary. We're just probably passionate when we come to the table. But the last area of commonality that I do feel like we emphasize, and I opened with it a little bit, hopefully so that you could connect with me as a person, is that at the core of what NOAA Fisheries does as well as what all you all are working to provide is that, you know, behind every fish and every drop of water that's in the river are the people that we serve. Um, so I think that whether we call them ratepayers, stakeholders, fishermen, fisherwomen, tribes, they are all really the same people we're trying to serve. Just a little bit more about NOAA Fisheries. So on the West Coast region, the West Coast region covers Oregon, Washington, Idaho, and California. Our job here is to manage marine fisheries so that they're sustainable, while protecting the sensitive species such as our endangered fish, as well as whales and turtles. While the work we do it's largely regulatory, so we work with not only the Endangered Species Act, and I expect most of you are familiar with that, but we also work with the Marine Mammal Protection Act, the Magnuson-Stevens Fisheries Act, which is how we manage our federal fisheries in the ocean, and other things like the Federal Power Act. We also depend on research from two science centers, one located in the north and one in the Southwest Fisheries Science Center in La Jolla. And we also partner with NOAA's Restoration Center, and all these things help us bring a wide range of science to our management. They also help bring expertise and funding that help us realize our recovery goals. So on the West Coast, I think it's important. One thing that I'm hoping to convey is that, you know, we're very regulatory when we're working in the riverine systems, but it's really connected for us to a larger economic ecosystem, if you will, as well. You know, NOAA Fisheries is housed in the Department of Commerce, so we've got a commerce lens on us. So we, on the West Coast, our commercial fisheries land about an average of 1 billion pounds of fish and shellfish a year. That's worth about $600 million. We also implement 6 international fishing treaties. Our work supports over 235,000 jobs across the Western states, and we're ranked top 3 nationally in either number of establishments like retail and wholesale seafoods, or employers in like subsectors like ports and harbors and shipbuilding. So we do have a touch on commerce, just as you all do. There are also 151 federally recognized tribes in the West Coast region, and that's an area that I take very seriously in terms of our commitments and responsibilities to the tribal trust resources. So we, you know, with that, there's a lot of the work we do around sustainable fisheries. We have had successes. It's not all about endangered species and extinction. We have had successes in rebuilding fisheries. Just over the last 25 years, our groundfish fishery is back from a painful collapse. And just this last year, we were able, through rebuilding and working with industry, to reopen over 2,000 acres of fishing grounds off the coast. That included off the coast of California. We've also seen, you know, blue whales, humpback whales, and fin whales recover, and you're seeing commerce and more people enjoying whales and whale watching as they get off the coast. And I just point out these 2 successes to emphasize that the work we do recovering species, it takes a lot of time, and just recognizing that the work we do takes a lot of time also gives me optimism for the work we're doing with our salmon. So just kind of to close this all back, you know, we do a lot, and maybe you'll ask me some more questions about some of the other things we do, but I just want to reemphasize that the intersection we have with the work you do, for me, is the people. People need fishing opportunities. People need water. They also need ag. I don't see that the work we do is an either or issue. It's about how we provide all these things for each other. So with that, Michelle, I'm sure I went over my 5 minutes, and I will ready to answer questions.
Great. Thank you, Jen. So you did mention some things about yourself and things you like to enjoy. Can you tell us a little bit more about how you came to be in your line of work?
Yeah. Well, where does it start? So just, I will say that there wasn't a time in my life when I woke up and said, I want to be the West Coast Regional Administrator. I think that I've been following a path of opportunities. And just have been open to those opportunities and what they can provide along the way. But it all has been started with my interest in the natural world, in understanding how the ecology works, um, how how the natural world works together, and how humans, as part of that environment, work with it. So as I've taken my, each step, I've worked in, regulatory ESA, but I've also worked in land management, working with people, with recreators on the ground, with conserving land and managing it for the whole ecosystem and humans being part of it. I think that over time, my brain was not as math and science oriented, but I felt really compelled to be able to tell the story and connect people to the environment and the importance of it, and how a healthy environment brings health to us as humans as well. And that's what really led me probably more into the policy realm, where if I had a few minutes to influence someone and I started finding success in that, that was my calling. So that, has led me to follow other paths and find out, for me, where I can make a difference, where the rubber meets the road. And that is in the policy, from my perspective, in the policy world, whether it's hustling for resources that we need, or influencing some changes in law to, get us past a barrier. So with that, I then found myself with an opportunity to work in Congress, which was right at the heart of all those intersections. A lot of fun, very chaotic, but led me back to the West Coast, where, between land management and fish management and biology and policy, working at a regional level and with a really phenomenal staff at NOAA Fisheries was an opportunity I couldn't pass up, and felt like a place where I could actually affect more and bring my policy and biology together. So it's just really been an evolution over time.
Great. Thank you. So kind of thinking about our region specifically, and when I say region in this context, I'm sort of thinking of the Central Valley specifically. Can you think of another region in the world that's like the Sacramento-San Joaquin Bay Delta? And are there any lessons that we can learn from that location and their experiences?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I I think when I engage with Sacramento Valley, it there's a lot there that reminds me, within our West Coast region, of what we've been doing in the Columbia River basin for years. And, what stands out to me in the Columbia is, we still have major giant population runs of fish. So, um, and, with big hydropower there. So while we might not have that infrastructure, the partnerships that have been required to maintain, the fish in the water, and the partnerships that have grown over time, are it's the same it's the same formula, I think, in the Central Valley. I think even if you can look even broader at civilizations that have been around for a longer time. If you look going over to Europe and in other areas where, they developed a long time ago. They probably had fish and anadromous species a long time ago, that are probably extinct, went extinct a long time ago. But I think, learning, if that's not what we want here, we've got a lot to learn. And I think because we still have a lot of undeveloped land on the landscape, which is going to help us meet our goals. I think that there are other places like in Australia and the Victorian principles that we can look to, that and I'm trying to figure out how to best talk about the Victorian principles, but that we can look to. But at the end of the day, I think it's the partnerships, and I talked about this a little bit before. The partnerships and successes that I've seen in places like the Columbia Valley, like the Yakima River, is the lessons that I see, and where we're making the most improvements in both resources and actual changes on the ground, is when the partnerships evolve to the point where you're interchangeable in how you can tell each other's story, and that you're working to solve each other's problems. I've been in places where irrigators are watching their water bypass down to the next irrigator, and realizing that water is bypassing down to the next irrigator, but could also get there through the stream that's now dried up, and actively, figure out how to stick a tube in there and get it through, get the river watered up, and boost salmon survival and production in a stream that would have otherwise been dry. So for me, those are the lessons that we can learn. And my sense is we're there in a lot of places in California, and that there's probably a little bit more we can do there.
Thank you. So the next question I have is a question that we received from our audience members in advance of this interview and this conversation. It's actually sort of a mashup question. And so in our local region here, we have the Sacramento Water Forum on the American River. And so this mashup question comes from a combination of folks that are members of the Environmental Caucus of that Water Forum. So this is from Barbara Evoy and Ted Rao with the Environmental Council of Sacramento, and also Clyde McDonald of the Save the American River Association. So I've kind of consolidated. They had a lot of really good questions, all very similar tone, and so I kind of wanted to mash it together. So I'm gonna do my best here. So the Sacramento Water Forum works with NIMS, the Bureau of Reclamation, and others to ensure the health of the Lower American River, particularly focusing on water temperatures. In the future, with climate change, meeting temperature objectives is likely to become increasingly more challenging. So what kind of actions do you think are needed to make sure that conditions on the American and other California rivers as well are adequately protective of species?
Yeah, I think it's going to be really challenging. I'm not going to say that there's a silver bullet for that one. When I think about what opportunities we have for fish, though, there are we've got temperature control structures. There's engineering we can do. There's more information we can learn about when and how, and temperatures inside of reservoirs, and how we manage that outflow. So there are probably some more engineering type solutions we can bring to that. For me, though, I think one of the biggest things that we're going to need to do, to support fish resiliency and ecosystem resiliency, is getting fish more access to areas that are currently not accessible to fish. And that may mean both where fish were historically known to be, as well as where fish we may not have thought they were going to be there before. And I'm thinking, higher up in watersheds. So fish passage is really important. I remember doing my first tour of the American River when I got to California. Kathy, my Central Valley team, took me out and looking down the middle fork of the American River and higher up in the watershed. And I was like, wow, that's amazing salmon habitat down there. And I was told we didn't have salmon there. So I think that part of that is getting fish into the upper watersheds where they can find those colder water refuges, and also build some adaptation strategies around that. I think that it's the combination of all the things that we're already working on, whether it's when we release the water, it's the habitat that we're providing that can provide cool places in the water. But this one's going to be an ongoing challenge. So it's a little bit of trying to do the best we can with the water temperature, but we still have a lot of places fish can access where the water will be cooler. So the solution for me is going to be both of those things, is getting fish into upper watersheds. And I do think that I did see some thoughts and questions around, are fish going to be able to survive this hot water? Well, they already have, right? They're already still coming back. So I think that's, brings me a lot of optimism. I also remember one of the first trips I made was down to Camp Pendleton, where we did it was on Camp Pendleton. I drove out to just this hot desert area where we had done some work on, I'm going to get this wrong, but I think it was our steelhead down there, where we had provided passage in the lower part of the river and provided access for fish to go up into areas they haven't been able to get to in a long time. And I asked, how many fish did we see coming across this area now that we've had this passage? And they told me 2. And just looking at how hot it was, the temperatures, the water, the conditions, instead of being bummed about it, I was like, yes, those are the 2 fish we want to get up into the upper watershed. And hopefully it's a male and female. And hopefully those offspring will be the ones that are adapting and are coming back. So water temperature will continue to be a really big issue, but we have solutions on the ground. And if we give fish access to some of these other areas, I truly believe they will adapt.
That's a good segue. We did receive another question that I think tapers nicely from the answer you just provided. It's from Art Godwin with RBGM Law. He asked, NIMS has worked on plans to return salmonids to upper watersheds and above rim dams, specifically, to avoid climate change stressors and other reasons. He was asking, if upstream reintroduction isn't successful, is there an alternative solution?
Well, it depends on your goal. If the goal is, fisheries, we have hatcheries on the landscape. Hatcheries are not the solution to all of it. And we know that. We know that from many, many years of thinking that we can put in a dam and build a hatchery and it will all be the same. Right now, that is probably the easiest solution, and it's not easy. But passage above those rim dams, I think, for me and for my team in Central Valley is probably going to be where we're going to be putting a lot of emphasis. And we're seeing it not only here in Central Valley, but we're also seeing that as the same solution in the Columbia River as well. And it doesn't have to be everywhere all at once, but I think that, with some targeted effort, that is going to be the solution. at least in the near term.
Thank you. I have another question, and this is kind of more in the habitat arena. So this is a question from Doug Brown with Douglas Environmental. He was asking if National Marine Fisheries Service is exploring reconnecting historic sloughs within the Delta to the Sacramento River as a way to improve habitat diversity for salmon.
Absolutely. I know, the reconnection. So one thing we know is that the more space, so the Delta areas are really important for juvenile survival for a lot of our fish. So the more habitat you have, we oftentimes in some areas I've worked in talked about Delta and estuary areas as like baby fish hotels. So the more hotels that you have, the more time they have there to get strong, to acclimate, hopefully to feed and not get eaten, and get strong and survive their ocean journey. So yes, that is an important component of the work that we're doing, long story short.
Great, thank you. So earlier you had mentioned sort of, the changes in your organization, the thinking, different tolerances, as well as the importance of partnerships in other watersheds as examples. Can you maybe give some thought as to what water infrastructure improvements could be made in the Sacramento San Joaquin River tributaries that could also help the health of Central Valley fish?
Yes. So, just focusing on infrastructure, things like state-of-the-art screens at places like the Tracy Fish Collection Facility. I think that infrastructure is over 60 years old. So there are places we can do better. Modernized fishways, like I talked about earlier. We've got at NOAA Fisheries, we've got a whole group that's focused of engineers, of fish passage engineers. There are a lot of old dams we know with fish ladders that are not meeting what we have as federal fish passage standards. So if you're not familiar with that, we can share. But we have national federal fish passage standards, and we have engineers on hand that can help update some of these structures. And that is, it's a great solution where we know we're not going to be taking out fish passage, fish barriers. So I think that is a great place that we can be working with you all on and updating the infrastructure. And I think it's something. And I don't know why. I don't know why we're a little bit farther behind in California than we are in other areas. It might be. I know in the Northwest, some of our fish passage but for both culverts and other barriers have been driven by litigation. Hopefully, we won't be in that case in California. But those are the resources and the areas where, as we move forward, we're trying to. I sometimes say if we focus as much on some of these recovery efforts, like modernizing fishways and things like this, as we do on regulatory, we might be a little bit farther along. So I'm definitely trying to help facilitate a culture in our agency where we carve out more time for some of these things. Like, okay, where are the fish dying right now? Let's fix some of those. And then I think some other places where we have an opportunity to improve infrastructure is in our hatcheries and our hatchery practices. So a lot of, the hatcheries in the Northwest a number of years ago, and then also for California, the Congress promulgated guidance around best hatchery practices, which dealt with not only how we propagate fish, but also how the structures themselves and how they impacted the environment could be updated and upgraded. And I think we have a ton of opportunities to do that in California. So yeah, fish screens, modernized fish ways, as well as hatcheries are all real tangible places that we can be working together on.
Thank you. So we received a question in the Q&A, and one of those, it's from Holger Forst. He asks, can you elaborate on the effectiveness of efforts on stream and habitat restoration relative to ocean warming and loss of food sources for salmon off our coast?
So I think I might understand that question a little bit. The importance of habitat, in the rivers is huge. You know, the life history of salmon. You can't. When we look at this, and we've looked at this for a long time, over many years, we look at. I call them dials. There's like 4 dials we can be dialing. Now there's 5 actually. There's hatchery practices, habitat improvements, harvest, how we dial up or dial down harvest. Hydropower has been a big piece. We now have predation issues that is kind of a new dial that we're having to grapple with across the West Coast region. So it's been where do we dial those up to get the biggest bang for the buck? There isn't just one dial there. You've got to do all of it. Habitat in the rivers. We've already talked a little bit about water quality. Habitat can help naturally cool some of the water. Habitat can help provide nutrients. So the importance of the river, it's not just about getting fish out of there. Some of the fish need to get strong in the river. The stronger they get in the river, the stronger they get in the estuaries, the more likely they are to survive the ocean. And from my perspective, that is a dial that we have control over. Turning up the habitat dial is something we have control over. I think that it takes a while for us to see tangible, numeric results from dialing up habitat. At the same time, so I think some people, if I'm understanding that question, maybe a little bit, may be in the camp of, well, you don't have enough proof that habitat is helping. And I would disagree. Again, we've seen areas where we increase, where if we're increasing connection of deltas, estuaries, there's greater fish use there. Where we can use habitat to bring temperatures down even a little bit. You know what it's like to step into shade, even when it's 80 degrees out. It's outside, it's a little bit cooler. So I think that that habitat in the rivers is really important. I guess that's if there's a follow-up to that, I'd love to know.
Wonderful, thank you. So I think another question I wanted to ask about was maybe a little more Bay Delta centric. So as you're familiar, this year's salvage, which is the rescue and relocation of fish, particularly of steelhead and salmon at the South of Delta export facilities this year, was higher than normal. What collaborative solutions do you see in the future to balance fish populations with reductions in fish losses at both in Delta and in the tributaries?
Yeah, well, so I'm going to say I have a few thoughts on that, so they might wander a little bit, but that event that happened caught, I think, all of us by surprise. And I think that, we're currently thinking about what we can do relative to that. one perspective is when I saw that, I'm like, well, that could be good news, right? That we're seeing more fish and more fish in that area. And so we want to do everything we can to make sure that the work that we're doing there is supporting, if indeed that is, we're seeing more survival, that it's supporting that. So it was surprising, but also a really good opportunity for us to be like, okay, this may not be the only time that this is going to happen. What do we need to be thinking about? I understand that there's non-physical barriers at Georgia Slough. And something like that is we can be implementing those. They're incredibly effective. And I'm strongly of the mind that there are other opportunities to reduce entrainment and the entrainment risk in the Delta. But also another takeaway, just in terms of management and things that we can do better and be more predictive, both for water supply, is that we need to expedite the development of our juvenile production estimates. This will allow us to be a little bit more scalable, be a little bit more predictable, and more accurate about give more accurate measurements and readings about what we're seeing, and then how do we dial the management in those areas. But there are, really, if we are successful at recovering fish, there's going to be more fish and more opportunities for entrainment. So I think we're going to rely on some engineering fixes down there as well. But I think we can do it. I'm optimistic.
Thank you. You did mention NIMF's role in the economy and commerce and how important NIMF's role is in that. Can you explain for some of us lay folk what factors trigger the cancellation of a salmon season?
Yeah, so if you don't know, in California, unfortunately, we are in the second year of no salmon, or extremely reduced salmon fishing opportunities. And so I think, and this is one area where I do feel like there's a lot of opportunity. The fishery management and the work that we do is established through what we call the Pacific Fishery Management Council. The council is a body that is set up to provide recommendations to the federal government, to myself, and then to the assistant administrator in DC on how to manage our fish. They meet up and down the West Coast. They run abundance models. They run prediction and forecast models. They set the seasons and allocations through the Magnuson-Stevens Act on allocations, on how you can measure a stock and when it is in decline, when it needs to be rebuilt, and allows us management authority for those federal fisheries. So things a lot, what is dictating at least the fisheries in California is the predictions of low run returns from the ocean. And so what I would really love to encourage here is if people are interested to reach out to some of our folks and start to get to know the work of the Pacific Salmon, or we call it PFMC, the Pacific Fishery Management Council. The science that they use, the models that they use, because I feel like there's often a disconnect, and even in my own organization, between those that work in the rivers and those that work in the ocean. My encouragement is, and maybe what we can do, maybe RWA can help us facilitate some of this as well, is cross-educating the models that we use, how we're dialing fishing down or up, how hatcheries are used, how the work we're doing in hatcheries is used to manage those fisheries. Um, and then with you all working in the rivers, knowing where the dials are, how we might be able to affect and support some of those fisheries. I know that for some of our bigger operations, the Pacific Fishery Management Council, for like the LTO and the work we do with the Bureau of Reclamation, Pacific Fishery Management Council has reached out and tried to do that engagement. I think we just need to find the forum and set that up so that people understand a little bit more about how they're connected in the work we're doing. For the work we're doing in the rivers, like I said, the more we can, produce strong fish that survive the ocean, that are adapting to different water conditions, temperatures, the more fish that we're going to be able to have come back. And understanding what you all can do in the river to affect that, I think, is really important. So maybe that's a request. You can help us set up a table to have more education on that side.
Thank you. Appreciate that. So there's a huge swath of fish stressors, and we've talked a little bit about that. And you've mentioned some of those already. We've got habitat loss, water quality degradation, climate change, all of these things. How would you, in Jen's perfect world, how would you like to collectively prioritize and address those issues? What would that look like in your perfect world? Maybe without litigation, without politics, all these fun things. What does that look like to you?
Yeah, if I could strip all of it away, it would be, I guess it would be those partnerships. It would be working together outside of our missions and mandates. It's like, what do we need as human beings, and what does the environment need? And really laying out that game plan of, here's where the first place we would want to put fish above a rim dam, and working together to get that happen. I think we're already seeing some of this emerge, or it's not already, it has been happening a lot in California. I look at the work we're doing in Shasta and the McCloud with the reintroduction there, that is bringing together the water users as well as tribes, as well as fishermen. So in my perfect world, all those people are working together. Like I said, they're understanding each other's needs and goals, and they're helping to solve each other's problems. So it'd be much more fun to do that than the battles that we're having in court these days.
Fair enough. All right. And just a question, I think this is for young and aspiring minds. What recommendations or words of wisdom do you have for young people that are interested in the fisheries, ecology, conservation, biology sort of arena?
Be curious. We need your minds. We need your brains. We need your new ideas. My recommendations are, know that you have a lot to contribute. And we're going to rely on your energy and your way of seeing the world to get us to the next stage of recovery for fish. I would say reach out where you're curious. Ask questions. Please be curious and ask questions. Reach out to me, reach out to Kathy. But we have a lot of work to do, and we have a lot of opportunities. It's really hard work, but it's really rewarding work. And it supports not only the fish, but it supports public and the health of the world. So please be curious. Anybody that's even just starting to think about it, we have a ton of opportunities through internships, through shadowing. We have got a lot of programs out there that can help you get to learn more about what we're doing and the opportunities. So don't be shy.
Excellent. And I think probably one or two final questions for you today. So is there a particular person in your field who's inspired you, and what did you learn from them?
Oh, there are a lot, but today, the one that I'm thinking about is came along earlier in my career, and he's the one that it must have seen something, thought I either knew that I was stupid and that I would take the job, or that that maybe I had some skills to develop and learn from. But his name was Dave Bertel. He's no longer with us, but he hired me to oversee the lands, about 1 million acres of lands across Washington state, when my background was in marine biology and things like that. So he thought that I could come in and oversee a division of 135 people and manage a $65 million budget with very little experience in either of those areas. And in doing that, he had my back. He created, his style of management was soft on people, hard on issues, and he really built a family-friendly environment. He had my back. He supported me through my mistakes. That also taught me that making mistakes was not the end of the world. That we all picked up and kept going, and that part of our work was about making mistakes, trying new things, and making mistakes. So Dave Bertel, he's the one I'm remembering today.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jen. With that, I think we're rounding the corner here. I'd like to just sort of ask you, Jen, if you have any closing remarks or anything that you'd like to add to the conversation before we close out this conversation today.
Well, I just want to again say thank you so much for this opportunity. And I wish I could actually see people a little bit more. I'd love this this opportunity, but I would, it's been really helpful, especially being new to California, to get out on the ground and meet folks. So I'm often like, I'm still getting to know California. Please let me know what I don't know. I'd like to learn. I'd like to meet you all, and build some solutions together. I want to leave with, I am still optimistic despite all of what we're dealing with climate change, with water, with drought, with fires. I'm still optimistic that we have a lot of places we can go, a lot that we can do together, like I talked about all day or not all day today, but in the last hour, where we can make a difference on the ground, where we can make the water that we have go farther for both people and for fish. So that's about it.
Excellent. Thank you. All right. I think with that, I'd like to thank everybody for joining us for Regional Water Authority's Coffee and Conversation with Jen Quan, NOAA's West Coast Regional Administrator. We really appreciate your engagement and participation today. A huge, huge thanks to Jen and to NOAA for the opportunity. So thank you so much. So gracious for the effort you've put into this and for willing to engage with us. It's fantastic. With that, we'll close out this webinar. Just a reminder that there will be a link to this recorded event that will be sent out later. And have a wonderful day, and be on the lookout for Regional Water Authority's next Coffee and Conversation. Thanks again, everyone.